Hello, this is Kenny again. This will be a very different lesson. In this lesson, I want to describe this crazy thing over here, which is called a metronome. Before I describe how this thing actually works, I want to give you a brief history of it. And after I show you how it works, I'm going to answer some questions that people have. Do you really need one of these antique things in today's day and age? Now, in order to start understanding where the metronome came from, we have to go back 200 years to what is now Germany, and this guy, whose name is Johann Nepomuk Melzel. I hope I'm saying it right. Okay, it's kind of a handle for his name, but Melzel is the name that you have to remember here. And he was a bit of a tinkerer. He was a mechanic guy. And in a way, he's a bit of a showman. He built these crazy instruments, and he was fooling around with all kinds of things. Okay, here's an example of what he sort of did. Okay, this is he wasn't an invention, but he improved upon this thing. This was actually a chess playing thing. It actually had a little guy in there playing chess, but he toured around with this, and he tried to make money off of this thing, because, faking that there was a guy in there. And this is the kind of thing. So a lot of people think he was a bit fraudulent. But anyway, he took the metronome idea from this guy named Nicholas Wenzel. Nicholas Wenzel actually invented the metronome. But Metzel, he was the one that improved upon it, patented it, made it famous. Okay? So at the same time, about 200 years ago, there was another guy living around much more famous than Mr. Metzel. It's this man, Mr. Ludwig van Beethoven. And he didn't originally discover the metronome first. He got to be known he's kind of friends with Metzel, sort of, sometimes friends, sometimes enemies, but it was because of this thing that Metzel was also making. Now, you might know that Beethoven was pretty much deaf by the end of his life. And this thing is called an ear trumpet. And I guess the idea is you put one part in your ear and people would talk through the horn part, and then it would be kind of like a hearing aid. So Mr. Metzel was making these crazy things for Beethoven so Beethoven could try to hear. But then, all of a sudden, Mr. Metzel comes out with the metronome, okay? This crazy thing. And why did Beethoven like this so much? Well, what he could do. Until then, all you had was these speeds, allegro, andante, larghetto, and stuff. But with the metronome, you had all of these speeds. You could change it, all right? And Beethoven loved this idea because it was very vague. Allegro. Even if you see that picture, it's anywhere from 120 to 168. What does that mean? I'll get into that in the next little part of this little video. But Beethoven was now able to write down on his scores the exact speed that he wanted. All right? He was able to go right down and say, it goes this fast. So Beethoven took Metzel's metronome, and he was the one that started making it famous. I'll show you how this works. It's not very complicated at all. This was a mechanical device. You can get battery-operated ones nowadays, but you got to remember this was invented over 200 years ago, and they did not have batteries. All right? So what you do is you take this thing and you wind it up with a little winding thing, just like an old-fashioned clock. All right? That's all you really do. Okay? Then, to get it going, you flip this thing, and there she goes. All right? Now, in order to change the speeds, all you do is there's a control thing here. It's just a pendulum weight. Really, this thing is just basically a kind of pendulum. And the further down you put it, the faster it goes. And the further you put it up, the slower it goes. And you can't see with this camera view. I will show you exactly what this says. I'll show you a better picture of it. All right, but it actually has speed markings, which I'll explain very shortly. And this is how the composer would tell you where you put the metronome is on these speed markings. But all you have to know about how this works is you just wind it up and let it go. Here is a picture of another metronome. This one is not mine. Okay, this one's a little clearer. This is why I'm using this. And I just want to describe the numbering on this thing, okay? All right, you'll notice all these numbers here. Okay, they go quite all the way up from 200 and some, all the way down to 40 some. And these Italian terms, largo, adagio, presto, these are all just typical Italian music terms. And these were all they had until the metronome came around. You would say allegro, how fast is it? We don't know. This is why Beethoven liked it so much. All right, so as you can see here, here's allegro, and it could be anywhere from 120 to 168. Now what does that 120 actually mean? That just means beats per minute, okay? So largo here, if you see that 60 on there, all right, that means 60 per minute, which means basically 1 per second. So the faster you go, presto, you're up to 200 beats per minute, okay? And prestissimo, as fast as this metronome goes, 208 beats per minute. You're going pretty good. So on this scale here on the metronome, this thing comes up and down, and all you have to do is move it up to whichever scale you want, okay? And I'll show you a little bit clearer one here. There's another metronome. This one's very different shape, all right? They're not all in the same shape, all right? And again, it's doing the same thing. On this scale here, it's going from all the way down there. The top is actually the slowest, and the bottom is actually the fastest. So prestissimo to largo, and this is the thing that actually changes it. It's just a counterweight because the thing is actually a pendulum. So you move this up and down, and the metronome would just change speed. Now, just to be a little clear on what these measurements mean. All right, at the start of any score, you might see something. You'll see something telling you what the speed is. All right, now I'm going to use for this example moderato. It is just Italian for medium, moderate speed, not too fast, not too slow. So it might just say this. It might just say moderato. You've got to take a guess at what is medium. But however, now if you see this, this is a metronome marking. It's saying the quarter note is given the speed of 120, meaning there would be 120 beats or 120 quarter notes per minute. All right? And that would be where you would set your metronome. You would set it to 120. Now the third line here, it might look like this at the start of the piece. MM. All right? And quarter note equaling 120 again. Now a lot of people just call it metronome marking. Just metronome marking, MM is English. It makes perfectly good sense. But originally it meant Metzel's metronome. That guy we talked about earlier, Mr. Metzel, I can't pronounce it properly sometimes, but that was what the MM actually sounds like. And you would actually see that sometimes. You can still see it in sheet music, all right? And then sometimes all you're going to see is just this quarter note equals 120. That's not even telling you there's moderato, but it's the same speed. These are all the same thing. And just so you know that it's not all these quarter notes, this one, that's a half note saying 60. All right? That's the exact same speed as a quarter note being 120. I know it's confusing. There's a lot of math in music, but you can get away without it. But sometimes you'll see a half note, a whole note. Not really. Sometimes an eighth note. Usually you'll see quarter notes as being the reference point. All right? And finally, here, sometimes you'll see this BPM equals 120. It's not as common, but it is very common in basically, you'll see later in computer software, they don't use the name Metzel's metronome. They call it beats per minute. And this says beats per minute equals 120, but these are all exactly the same. Okay, now is the big question. Do you really need a metronome? Okay, the question is, yes, you do. Do you need one like mine? Not necessarily, but I'll explain what I mean. If you're learning an instrument, a metronome is a wonderful device for keeping track of time, for keeping your beat steady. All right? You don't necessarily need the old ones like mine, though. Okay, for example, there are many online that are totally free. Okay, just go to free online metronomes and you'll find a whole bunch. Now, this one's kind of nice, all right? All right, I'll play this one for you. Okay, this is from Virtual Sheet Music is the company, and it sounds like this. And it's kind of interesting. It's got that ding every 4 beats, because we're in 4/4 time. So it gives you a little sense of the beats, and you could switch it just like any normal metronome by putting the knob thing up, all right? All right, or down goes faster. Now these things just work just perfectly fine. You don't have to have a physical one. You can have this right on your phone, actually, you know. You don't have to have even a computer with you. Just put it on your phone and you've got a perfectly good metronome. All right, now this says it's animato, all right? This is where it's a little bit strange. You know, I said it was moderato. Everyone's going to call it different. Animato just means animated. We won't get into that. But let's try another one here, okay? Let's try this one. Now, this one looks a little simpler. I've got this one set to 120 BPM. You see there's that BPM, and this is a computer way of saying it, but that's the same thing as 100 beats per minute. And this one does say moderato, and this one sounds like this. See, this one actually looks like a real metronome because it's doing the back and forth thing, all right? So that's a nice one too. Just pick whatever one you like. You got your speeds here, you got your tempo here, all right? And just so you know that, you know, they don't necessarily have to look like a metronome. This is also a metronome as well, all right? I've got it set for 120 beats per minute here, all right? Doesn't even look like a metronome, but it works just as good. This one's interesting because it's telling you 1, 2, 3, 4. It's counting for you. So whichever one you like, you can use any one of these, and it just helps you to practice. Now this is getting a bit extreme. As you can see, this doesn't look like a metronome at all. This is a drum set. It really is a drum set. This is an online drum set. It's called, as you can see, MT Power Drum Kit 2. All of this stuff I'm putting in the description, so you can look up all of this stuff very easily. So look in the description of video, and if you want to download this thing, okay, this is a free drum kit sampler, all right? All right, and you can make your own beats out of this. Obviously, you can record these. All right, whoops, where am I? Here I am. Okay, that's fine. But, you know, if you really, really want to, you can go silly and start practicing with a drum set, all right? Now, this is not a metronome, but you can play along with this. This is in 4/4, and I have it set to, guess what, 120 beats per minute. Okay, that's a drum beat. No reason you can't play along with that if that's what you prefer. And sometimes it's good too, because if you get playing with the drummer, it's good to know how they play, and you can try other ones out. That's still in 4/4 and 120. All right, so that's a bit extreme. It's not really a metronome, but it's keeping you in time just like anything else. So back to the final question. Why would you like an old metronome like mine? One of these old-fashioned things, okay? You know, it's bulky, it takes up space, you know, you can do it right on your phone. You don't need such a bulky thing. And my only answer is it's old-fashioned. It's just nice. It's just like some people like an old clock or an old watch, or they keep their family heirlooms or something, and it just happens to look nice on a piano if that's what you're happening to do. That's my only real reason. I do recommend using a metronome for sure, but you don't have to have one of these, but I happen to like it. And if you ever see one in a garage sale or somewhere, you can buy them on Amazon. They're actually fairly expensive. I was kind of surprised surprised. You can buy one of these, but if you see something and it's $5 at the garage sale, pick one up for the heck of it, because they're a heck of a lot of fun. And you know, they're just old like me.